Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency to order. Clerk, please conduct the roll call.
Director Robinson.
Present.
Alternate Director Todd. Alternate Director Rodrigue. Director Brown. Vice Chair Crane.
Present.
Chair Brown.
Here. I'd like everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on to item 3. This is our consent items. We have A, approval of minutes from the February 14th, 2019 meeting. And B, appointment of Bess Salomon. How do you say it? Salomon? Salomon. I always mess that up. Sorry, Beth. As alternate member to the Technical Advisory Committee representing Russian River Flood Control. So, directors, any questions?
Move approval.
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second? Both consent items. Do you have comment?
We should do them separately, however. I just don't, I mean, each item they're very different from each other, and I think just for keeping them compartmented in their proper.
And move 3A, approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All righty. Clerk, please conduct the roll call for the vote.
Nope. Director Robinson.
Aye.
Alternate Director Todd.
Aye.
Alternate Director Rodrigue.
Aye.
Director Brown.
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane.
Aye.
Chair Brown.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Move the recommended action for 3B.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. Please conduct the roll call. Vote.
Director Robinson.
Aye.
Alternate Director Todd.
Aye.
Alternate Director Rodrigue.
Aye.
Director Brown.
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane.
Aye.
Chair Brown.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, we have staff updates. Ms. Duquette.
Sarah Duquette, Mendocino County. I just want to give you a quick update. We're going to talk a little bit later about Proposition 68 solicitation, but the comment period is open. We want to discuss and get direction to file a letter. Right now, the wording in the solicitation for implementation dollars, you would have to have a GSP completed, and the grant period to apply is before the due date for medium priority basin. So we're looking for a comment letter so we can say as long as the GSP is in process, you can apply for implementation dollars. That way we're eligible as well as the critical basins that are due by 2021.
So you are requesting approval to write a letter?
Direction to staff.
Direction to staff, and that would be to Department of Water Resources?
Yeah, a letter to DWR.
Directors?
So moved.
Okay, I think we can just give direction as a consensus, because it's not really an action item here. Okay. Does that work for everybody? Does anyone disagree? All right. Seeing no disagreement. Further staff updates?
That's the only update. Everything else will be covering below.
Okay, and I'll review the letter. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. All right, moving on to item number 5, we have public comments on items not on the agenda. Anyone that would like to comment, please come forward. Seeing no one coming forward for public comment, we're moving on to our action items. And item number 6A, discussion and possible action regarding an information update from Larry Walker and Associates regarding the Technical Advisory Committee's review of the initial Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Plan Phase 1 and the deliverables. Staff, do you want to do the introduction, please?
Sarah Duquette, Mendocino County. So the TAC first started meeting in November of 2018, and they also met in April of 2019 and today, and they reviewed the Phase 1 deliverables. So Larry Walker and Associates is here to give a presentation about the comments from the TAC with the recommended motion to accept the TAC's recommendations. So I'll turn it over to Laura with Larry Walker and Associates.
Thank you. So I think it can be very brief.
Could-
What?
I'm
Could
sorry,
you-
could you
you-
state your name for the
Laura
record, please?
Foglia, Larry Walker Associates. Laura Foglia. And so what we did is, as a first step of our GSP development, we went through what was already done in the basin and asked the TAC to comment on what needed to be changed and what needed to be kept as it was, and so this is a kind of quick summary of what we discussed at the TAC meeting last month, 2 months ago actually, and now we are basically incorporating in our findings all the comments from the TAC, and these will be kind of reflected in the new chapters that we are writing.
Can I stop you for just
Sure.
one moment? These PowerPoints are in our packets?
Yeah, it's all in it was a single file with
Right.
everything.
Okay. Please go forward.
So the major comments that we received about the first step of the groundwater sustainability plan development, which is the hydrogeological conceptual model, was about adding a discussion of soils type in the basin. And this was a comment that we received from Sonoma Water. And so we are working on including these new pieces in the chapter. And also there was a request of refining and revising the geological cross sections. As a requirement for our GSP, we need to have at least two cross sections of the basin. So there are that need to be submitted to support the geology of the system that we are presenting. And comments were mostly suggesting that this cross-section needed to be revised to better highlight principal aquifers and to define the properties of the different units we are talking about. And these are very important properties that we need also to include in the future model that will be used for the water budget. So we are working in coordination with the USGS to refine all the available data and create new cross sections and slightly modify the geology of the basin that was presented in the previous reports. And I think when we meet next time, you will receive the kind of final presentation of our results.
I do have a question.
Sure.
When the suggestions are made, how does the TAC find majority approval? I mean, how is that done?
I would say that we basically gave them a summary report with all the key findings of the previous reports, and then during the meeting we really discussed and tried to find the agreement of what everybody agreed needed to be done, and this is a sort of a summary of the
So it's agreement,
yeah.
by
I think
agreement.
so. I don't know.
Sarah Duquette, Mendocino County. In your packet, you also see from the November meeting to the April meeting, there was a memo outlining all of the comments that we've received and kind of how Larry Walker kind of addressed to those areas. So we had the first round of initial comments, and then we came back to the comments to review the memo. And there was quite a bit of discussion around some of the Sonoma Water comments to kind of get consensus on, okay, what really needs to be improved or what areas do they need to work on.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. And other major comments were related more to the development of the model, and in a sense, we are taking care of all of this because from the previous model to the new model that we are developing, things have changed completely. So the new model is has a completely different representation of the system, because that was the decision of moving away from the original model in order to coordinate with Sonoma Water and USGS on their efforts. And I will present you some maps later on. And the main question where there is the need to better represent surface water systems that were not really properly represented in the previous effort. And this is important because the surface water systems are telling us how much flow is entering into the valley. So we want to be precise on quantifying how much water is really coming into the groundwater basin. And so we are completely revamping the model using different way of representing surface water bodies that hopefully will address all the comments regarding the surface water system in the valley. And basically, the previous effort also included some preliminary finding on sustainable management criteria, but the general agreement was that this chapter needs to be kind of completely redone because it was at the very beginning. So we will be getting back to this chapter once we have a water budget developed and some more information developed. And we also reviewed the existing monitoring protocol report, and this should be rewritten following the WR best management practices, but a lot of the information are there, so we will be reworking just to really be in compliance with the actual GSP requirements. And then there were very minor comments that for completeness they are there, but I think we don't need to go into the details right now. And the memo that you have in the package presents a little bit more details on all what we discussed before and after the TAC meeting and at the TAC meeting. And we are just taking care of updating everything based on those findings. And so where we are at right now, we discussed the procedure for the new hydrogeological conceptual model this morning at the TAC meeting, and it will be ready for presentation at the board meeting at the next meeting.
Okay, any questions, statements?
Laura, you said Franciscan Formation will be dropped from the modeling zone. What were the boundaries or what areas that we're talking about excluding?
So the Franciscan Formation will be in the entire model. It will just be represented differently. So basically, because I have a few slides later, our model now will not simulate only the groundwater basin, but will simulate the entire watershed, because we need to capture mainly the tributaries. But up in the mountains, we cannot really simulate the aquifer. So we will simulate a Franciscan Formation, which is 50 meter thick, which is what USGS is doing. So the Franciscan Formation is really the bedrock everywhere. So it will be included. I think from the discussion with the TAC, it was mostly we were debating about language for that specific thing. But the Franciscan Formation is really the bedrock it's on the bottom of the entire model. So it's simulated, but with a very low conductivity. So it's obviously not contributing as the other units, but it's there.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, anyone else? So we move on to 6B.
Sertica, Mendocino County, the only recommended action we have is that you accept their comments, and then we can move forward with
Okay.
incorporating everything,
All right.
and especially the areas where they wanted more information, so we can work on that and include it in the final model.
So we need to just receive the report, accept it, okay?
So moved.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Crane. You have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Brown. Roll call vote, please.
Director Robinson.
Aye.
Alternate Director Todd.
Aye.
Alternate Director Rodrigue.
Aye.
Director Brown.
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane.
Aye.
Chair Brown.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Sarah, for that. Keeping us on track. All righty. Item 6B, discussion and possible action regarding Proposition 68, solicitation for groundwater sustainability plan development and projects. So we're going to have an additional presentation, and will that also be a PowerPoint?
I have it just one slide, but Sarah can,
Okay.
you can,
Please
Sarah,
go for
Sarah Duquette, Mendocino County. Proposition 68, the solicitation package right now is out for public comment. We wanted to talk about Proposition 68 and our options. We'd like direction from this board to move forward with putting together an application for that, and we'd come back later with like a formal resolution and stuff for you guys to approve. But we have Erin Cuthbertson from Dealey Bar here to help provide some information on 68. And then from there, we'll talk about what areas we want to get additional funding for.
oh, yeah, sorry. I didn't say it.
I wouldn't even know what to do.
Yeah, it's just that I don't see the mouse. The mouse is there, but it's. Okay. Okay. So Laura Paglialeri, Walker Associates. So we discussed, and I think Aaron can jump in and provide better information about the Proposition 68 that it's out for comments right now until next week. That's why Sarah was asking for approval to submit a letter. It looks like the fundings, the grant will be submitted at the request will be submitted at some point at the end of the summer, and then we'll find out if it's funded or not in the winter time. And the goal of this call is basically to fund GSAs that eventually didn't ask for all the money needed to really develop the entire plan. And so for Ukiah Valley, you are eligible for a $2 million as the total, but already got about $760,000 from the previous call. So basically now we can apply for something like 1.20 something, 200 something. And the key piece is that we cannot ask for funding for items that were already funded in the previous call. So we need to think about what are we missing that it's really important to be successful with this GSP development. And so we started some discussion on what we think are tasks that should be included and would help us in just be more efficient with this GSP development. And we felt like we really didn't consider how much outreach and educational work was going to be needed. And we need to be a little bit more present with a variety of different communities and present more what's happening. So, and it's better to do it sooner rather than later, so to avoid anybody being surprised on January 31st, 2022. And we really would like to provide enough information to everybody. The second topic is, as you know, in the original grant, what was requested was to take the model developed by the previous group and just use that just with some refinement, but use that for the GSP, for the water budget. And but it turned out that with the request of coordinating with what Sonoma Water is doing and USGS is doing, we are completely changing the model. So the model is completely new. We could not reuse what was already done, and we are developing a new tool. It's also, in a sense, because we got comments about the need to incorporate a better representation of surface water and really stimulate the entire watershed, not just the floodplain, otherwise it's difficult to really have a proper water budget. So this is a new piece of work that we would like to highlight that was not requested in the previous grant. And then there is room in this grant to ask for instruments for more data collection, and considering the scarce amount of data in the valley, it might be good to suggest to have some more instruments for collecting groundwater level and stream flow data. So we can, mostly in the tributaries, but at least that would help us with our water budget. And then the last point is that we can include a sort of pilot project that can be an example of the type of implementation that can happen during the GSP development and after, mostly after. And it has to be a pilot, so we cannot think about a big groundwater recharge project for this specific hole. We just have to think about a kind of a demonstration site where we can say, this is how we would design, and then we will go after future grants for the full-scale implementation. And these are some ideas that we were discussing this morning with the TAC. We are open to suggestion for possible, I don't know, specific project that some of you may have in mind. But I think all these topics were really not covered much in the previous application. So that's the reason why we came up with this preliminary list.
Okay, directors, do you have any comments, suggestions? Vice Chair Crane?
Request streamlined bit of language for the recommended action.
Sarah at Mendocino County. At this point, we'd like direction that yes, we can move forward with developing an application for Prop 68 would come back. We do it similar to the last one, so you'd see kind of the application, and then the last one, the current grant is being implemented by the Mendocino County Water Agency on behalf of this agency. So if we do the similar process, you see the solicitation packet, you pass the resolution, and then it can go through the county's process, and we'd be the submitting entity on your behalf. And mainly we know we really need more money for education and outreach, and the GS flow model and some more instruments. I think the biggest kind of question mark is if we're interested in looking at the projects. The TAC seem to have some good feedback, so that's kind of the question mark item of, do we want to look for a type of projects as a companion piece to this application for these kind of GSP essentials?
Did you want to speak, sir?
No.
Okay. I'm going to ask for public comment. We do have some of our TAC members here. If anyone would like to comment and offer their advice. Seeing no one come forward. Oh, please come forward, Devin. Restate your name for the record.
Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau, and you may cover this later because I believe I saw a slide in another presentation. But can you go into a little bit more detail on the instrumentation for more data collection in terms of where you would be looking in the tributary systems, what that entails?
Yeah, so we discussed this morning at the TAC meeting, and one of our colleagues was in Mendocino County, was here in Ukiah last month to discuss more in details with some of the member of the GSA board and the TAC. So we were really looking for suggestion on best possible location for more data in the tributaries. So we are kind of open. We were really asking for ideas of type of instrumentation and type of setup, because you know the area better than us. So location where it is safe and easy to install a stream gauge, or areas where would be useless because it's too complicated and the data would not be reliable. But we are looking into continuous measurements of stream flow. Because we will be talking about this later, but because for this GSP, the key question is really surface water and groundwater interaction. So how the system is reacting with every type of flows, like if there is precipitation, if there is whatever happens, more release, less release from Lake Mendocino, whatever it's happening to the system in terms of surface water. So we really put it out as a discussion point. We don't have right now because the Prop 68 just came out, so we started thinking. But we are open to suggestion on locations. And I don't think we need to be so precise in the application. We can request a certain number of location for stream flow measurements, for example, but then we can discuss more in details where this is possible, where it makes sense, where it would be more useful. So this is
Do you have further questions or comment?
Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. No, I mean, that makes sense. I was just, in terms of cost, looking at, was it 1.4 million, gauging can go pretty quick. So I just wasn't sure sort of what kind of equipment we're looking for, how many locations are needed, what that sort of process is going to look like, that kind of question.
Yeah. No, there are no, that's the reason why we are asking where eventually would be more effective and easier, because obviously we don't want to spend the entire grant for getting one stream flow measurements. We want to get something more. So that's exactly the reason why we would like to hear. Mike Webster had already provided us some ideas because of what he did with USGS in the past. So he suggested some possible locations. But again, we need to be efficient and look for locations that will give us information without being too expensive.
Laura, are your
Yep.
draft locations just those transects that I see in some of this paperwork, which I can't
No.
find right now?
Those are they're coming up next. Now, those are the transect location for wells. And that's a separate grant that we are getting. So, those are not yet, those are a different type of discussion.
Okay.
These are, again, on top of those ones. So this
All
is
right.
something else we can
So
go
two
after.
batches of potentially new monitoring wells and instrumentation?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's exactly.
And then the second thing I was wondering, presumably there's a scenario where we don't get this money, and I can see that means we have to do with less outreach and less instrumentation and no pilot project. Does that mean we don't get a groundwater model?
You will get anyway a groundwater model. We signed for that. I mean,
Okay.
let's think that we will probably get
All right.
part of it.
So this grant would allow us to get the groundwater model with bells and whistles?
Yeah.
Better compatibility with other people's modeling efforts?
It will be fully, we are really working on these models together right now.
Okay.
So at least to get the basic exactly the same. And then we were discussing this morning, we are moving faster. So our model will be out before the USGS model is done. But that's kind of expected. But at least whatever comes out later, we will be able to compare results, even if it's after your GSP. Because, even once you submit the GSP, then there is all the implementation phase, and comments can come at that point as well. And probably the USGS big model will be ready at that point, after 2022. And at least we will have a common base we started from, and we can discuss results a little bit in a I don't know, hopefully in a more in a useful way, because we are not starting from two completely different models.
Thank you.
That's the hope.
Ms. Duquette, do you have comment?
Sarah Duquette, Mendocino County, and part of the reason for additional outreach and education. So I would say we're doing like the baseline requirements, but there are some harder to reach groups. So part of it's disadvantaged communities and minority communities, and there's a lot of successful tactics that other GSAs are using, but they also can be a little bit more expensive, like
Translation.
having translation or like easy readable documents that are in Spanish. We also want to make sure that we can continue our outreach efforts with the tribal community and have a number of kind of community meetings, but also within the communities, so that we're targeting like Redwood Valley and Ukiah. So it would kind of take us from like baseline, I think, to more of like a thorough outreach to the entire basin, including some of the harder to reach communities.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we need to give some direction to staff. What do you suggest? Zach, do you want to take a stab at it?
Sure, I move that we, staff continues to move forward with a proposal and submission for the Prop 68 money.
Okay, that's,
Second. How close is that?
that is perfect.
Great.
So we have a motion by Director Robinson and a second by Vice Chair Crane. Clerk, or do we have any other comment on it? Seeing none, you want to do a roll call vote?
Director Robinson,
Aye.
alternate Director Todd,
Aye.
alternate Director Rodriguez,
Aye.
Director Brown,
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane,
Aye.
Chair Brown.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, the next item, C. Again, an action item. This is an update, discussion, and possible action regarding the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency's Technical Support Services application. And Ms. Duquette, are you going to do the introduction?
Sarah Duquette, Mendocino County. We received approval to move forward with our request to drill 6 wells that DWR is funding. We had a kickoff call last week with DWR about kind of next steps and what we need to do. So in your packet, you have 2 attachments. One's the presentation. The other one is the detailed locations of what we scoped out. So we looked at this whole region and all of the public lands, and that's how we came up with our contingency locations and our plan locations, really targeting public lands. Now that we have the approval to go forward, we have some sample agreements from DWR as well as the RCD and Sonoma Water. So I'm working with the county council's office to work on drafting those land access agreements. There's also going to be an agreement between this body and DWR, which once we have all the details figured out and the scope in there, we'll come back for your final approval. Just looking at the lands, we have a mix. So there's a couple sites with the city of Ukiah, and they've been open to partnering with us and working with us. There's also some sites from Willow and Millview that we'd like to move forward with, so we'll be working directly with their board of directors. There's also Ukiah Unified, and I've talked to some of their board members, and they seem open to it. And then there's a couple sites that we're looking at really pulling back from, like the Ukiah Successor Agency and the Vineyard that we were looking at, because there's a possibility of sale, so it's easier to do a land access agreement if we know that piece of property is going to be in the ownership for 25-ish years, because that's like the term of the agreement for land access. So we're working through that. Once we have the land access agreement finalized this, hopefully by the end of this month or early July, we'll be going and working directly with those public agencies to get approval to do the well drilling and working with DWR on the scope, and that agreement will come back for you to sign. The goal is we can sort out all the 6 locations and have all the land access agreements in place by the end of August, so that we can get wells drilled in mid to late October, and that kind of can coincide with the drilling they're doing for Sonoma County. And I'll pass it over to Laura to talk about the cross sections.
Laura Foglia, Larry Walker Associates. So I'm just we saw already this picture in the past, but it's just to refresh everybody's memory. The way we designed this monitoring network is thinking of the main possible problem in this valley, which is surface water, groundwater interaction. So we wanted to have transects with monitoring wells on one side and the other side of the river. The key question is how do we really want to use these wells to understand the connection between the surface water and the groundwater. And the way to do it is installing a continuous monitoring instrument in these wells so that we can see how the river is responding to precipitation, for example, and in which way this signal propagates into the groundwater. And we can see if the groundwater is providing water into the river, or if the river is losing water and just recharging the groundwater. So we figure that this type of design is what will give us an idea of the direction of the fluxes between river and groundwater. So, and continuous monitoring is the only way to do that, because we will be able to correlate precipitation, stream flow information, and groundwater. So once we know how everything changes over time, then we will have a good idea of how to represent the system also in our model. And in our model, it will be simulated in that way. This data will give us a sort of confidence about what we are doing, because otherwise we don't have any comparison. And so this is just a sketch. Then what we did, we thought about location of existing stream flow gauges. We look at the county information about private and public land. We were looking for really drilling these wells as much as possible into public land, because then there are no problems about posting this information at some point. And what we came up with is a sort of 4 possible location of transects that are distributed throughout the valley. So we go north to south. And all the dots that you see there, obviously we didn't want to drill all those wells, but it was just to give an idea of existing wells and location where we can drill something new. So take advantage of what's already there and drill something new in order to have as much as possible these transects represented. And basically what we, the final idea of the new wells that would be drilled is here. Some of the wells are still being considered, some will be dropped. And out of these 6 wells, we will drill 4 shallow wells that will be around 50 feet deep. And then 2 multi-completions wells that will go down to 300 feet. And this is going to give us a way to characterize also the deeper aquifer, not only the very shallow aquifer. And all these wells will be equipped with continuous pressure transducer that will be able to basically via telemetry to send messages every night with the data collected for that day. So we will be able to have all the information online. And we have a simple website. We will be able to share this data with whoever wants to check every night the condition of the system, or even every once in a while. But so the data will be all available for the board and the TAC pretty much right away. And then we will decide how to include them into the network. Because being funded through DWR, this data will for sure be in the groundwater monitoring network.
We have a question.
Sure.
2, going back a bit, you spoke of whether the river is contributing or receiving. It's my understanding that both of those conditions occur over the course of a year.
Mm-hmm.
And wet year, dry year, contribution from the eel through Lake Mendocino are all factors. Your presentation, my first takeaway from that was looking for one of those, not all of those. So these wells then should help understand when that condition changes.
Yeah, and where
and where.
possibly.
What tributaries are being considered for the surface water component?
I will show you later a map. We are trying.
Later's fine.
Yeah, okay, but we are considering as much as possible in the model all the tributaries that, so we prepare different maps of the tributaries and we ran it through the TAC in April. the TAC provided comments, and now we kind of have a map of how the tributaries network look like. And so we will show it to you later, and we are still refining because we had more meetings last couple of weeks ago, so we are still refining that. So in the model, everything is represented. In terms of data that we have available, we don't have data for everything. So that's why we were talking about eventually collecting something more.
All right. And while you're setting up, or someone is setting up a process of being able to go online, I presume, and find this information, is there a way that it could be set up so that people who want it pushed to them could have that done?
Sorry, people want to?
Have it pushed to them. In other words, a 12-hour or a 6-hour or something.
So right now, the way we are setting up this system is that data are collected every 15 minutes or every hour, depending on the request of the landowner or the county or whatever. And then every evening, we receive a message from the instruments with the daily data, with the hourly data or 15 minutes data. And these are the data that automatically get posted online. So as soon as the data are available, they are posted after a little bit of quality control. And but they have to come basically through us. It's not yet a we are not thinking now about a system where that is. We need to come up with the idea that it's working for each of the people interested. So right now it's more like in the evening you connect and you can see the daily data, the hourly data for that day, or 15 minutes.
And it's a time certain that report will be?
Yeah, there is a certain time that we can, that's something that we can decide. Okay. And because we can decide at what time the instruments will send the email to the website with the new data.
All right, so if there's an email going to the site, my question is, could that be pushed to places beyond that one site?
That's something that we need to discuss. The reason why it goes now to the website is because we would like to be able to control the quality of the data, and not, let's say that the instrument that it's broken, something happens, and then we want to be able to see before we post online data that are wrong. Let's put it in. So, but that's something that we are really getting started now, so it's something that we can discuss.
Okay.
Just have
Yes.
a question about how the specifications for the wells are established, the depth, the diameter. How is that done?
So the depth is because basically we are looking at all the geology, and that's why we also got to the idea of not having only shallow wells but also deeper wells. I think some of the final details on the depth will be decided also on the site once DWR comes for the drilling, because we may have to adjust what we are thinking right now without knowing much about the actual geology at that location. And the diameter, it's only monitoring wells. So we just need something where a PVC pipe where we can install this 1-inch instrument. So there are not many requirements about, I think there is a standard design for these monitoring wells, and it's okay for what we need to do.
So it's really the geology of the ground, the rock or the soil, and the depth that we're going to be. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, anyone else? And Director Brown, sometimes I can see you, sometimes I can't, so
I'll let you know
it's
if I
okay,
have a
Carla.
comment.
So just wave your hand if I
Indeed.
don't call on you and you have a
Indeed.
question
Thank
or
you.
statement. Okay. Anyone else? I think you had further presentation on this item.
Mm-hmm.
We stopped you in between.
No,
Mr.
no,
Kett?
this one is done.
I
Oh,
just
okay.
wanted to briefly mention, once we get the 6 wells finalized, DWR will actually come out here and do a site visit. So we'll be able to kind of map out the final details on location and all of that stuff prior to. And if I remember correctly, I think we were trying like August at least to have a site visit. So a lot will be happening this summer. So we're gonna move pretty quick now that we've got the go-ahead.
I do have a question.
Vice Chair Crane?
We have DWR.
There's the potential that the basin is really a series of smaller basins. In fact, it seems to me likely, which points to having more than a few sites to be able to understand, because it means if the level's not moving uniformly, then it's separate compartment. And I'm sure that that's part of what you consider in trying to select the best combination of sites. I look forward to hearing what has been found, what has been presumed as that evolves, because until the wells operate for a while, we don't really have any sort of real proof of what's below us.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we would like to move soon. So if we install everything in October, we will have a full winter of data. And winter is interesting because there is the water coming as precipitation and through the river and through the tributaries, so that will be very useful. And I totally agree. That's why even if it's only 6 wells, we are trying to distribute them in the system so they are not concentrated in one location. And also that's the reason why we suggest to go after more funding for more instruments and more data collection, because one of probably for this basin, one of the most important type of information is going to be the actual data that are lacking right now, and can really help resolving whatever issue are there, or maybe just helping us saying, you know, we did our duties and we are monitoring and we don't see significant problems.
Green?
Sir, please, thank you for being here and state your name for the record.
Aaron Cuthbertson, Department of Water Resources. So just to piggyback on what Sarah was talking about as far as scheduling. So there is some urgency in getting site agreements in place for these. We're scheduling work on drilling projects. It's starting now. So the sooner we get the final sites agreements in place, the better. DWR has to come out and do environmental site assessments on all of the sites as well. So we have to schedule that. And then we have to do site visits as well. So there's a bit of urgency. I just want to underscore that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah DeKett, Mendocino County. So for many of our board members that also sit on other water districts, well, you'll be hearing from me.
Is that that's a warning?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comment, questions? Seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Anyone that would like to comment, please come forward, state your name for the record.
Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau, and I appreciate, Sarah's reached out to me a bit about the one private property location that's listed in here. And since it seems like we're on a fairly tight schedule, not knowing where that's going, just keep me posted, see what we can do. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Kett?
Sarah DeKett, Mendocino County. After talking with County Council's office, they recommend that if we do decide to do a well on a property that is has a high probability of potentially being sold, that we need to go down the easement path, and I don't think any of us want to go down the easement path. So our number one priority is going to be getting the 6 wells on the public land, and from just kind of early assessment, and seems that that's very likely since most of them are within either a local water district or within a local agency. So we're going to do our best to move quickly and get the 6 locations decided upon and reaching out to those boards to get approval. And if that doesn't work out or pan out, we might have to look at some contingencies and then make some other decisions. But I feel pretty confident we can get them all 6 on public lands.
So Are you going to need assistance with going to those boards?
Sarah Ket, yes. So once we have the final agreement done with county council, and they didn't quite like all of the templates, so it's probably going to be kind of a hybrid like land access agreement, then I'll look at the board meeting schedules for those boards. So if especially since a lot of you guys have connections with the three primary agencies are Willow Water District, Millview Water District, City of Ukiah, and Ukiah Unified. So
Okay.
Chair Brown, of course, for
So-
some of them, and then if any of the other ones on like Upper Russian or Red Valley Flood Control. But I can coordinate with the board members to make sure we have some representation when we go to the board
Okay,
meetings.
how long has it been in county council's office?
It will be a week this Friday, and I had one meeting this week. So we kind of decided upon kind of a hybrid of the three different types of land access agreements. So the goal would be to have those agreements finalized by the end of the month, so that we have the month of July to get all of the outreach to the agencies done.
Does that work for the timeline? Do we know? Sounds like it. Because you say urgency.
Aaron Cuthbertson, Department of Water Resources. So the part of the urgency is that DWR has some work to do on our end, both scheduling the drilling and getting environmental site assessments done. So the sooner we know exactly what sites you're going to do, the better, because then we can get started on scheduling those two things. So I think it works, but sooner is better.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. So that is an update. Do we want to provide direction? I think you have your direction. So I don't think there's any further action that we need to take. Okay. So we'll move on. That was item 6C. We'll move on to item 6D. And this is discussion and possible action regarding presentation on the development of components of the Ukiah Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan. And we're going to have an update and a presentation. Please go forward, Laura.
Thank you. Laura Paglialeri, Walker Associates. And basically what we want to do today is kind of telling you where we are, so what we are doing, and knowing that my feeling also from the TAC meeting this morning is that you would like to have a model and numbers coming soon, and they are coming. we really did we want to show you that we did our due diligence in trying to get the best possible information that we can include in the model. So we discussed with the TAC in April, and this is what I'm presenting you today. We also refined our discussion, talking to some of the TAC and the GSA board members last month. And we will be able to have sort of final maps with our findings ready pretty soon. And those are the data that are entering into our model. So I would like to give you an idea, because I don't want anybody to be surprised once you will get the big GSP chapter to read. So how these GSP chapters look like, and which are the pieces we are working on right now. The GSP chapters are basically 5 main chapters. We have an introduction, which is something that we will be working together with you and the county on putting together. And then there is a second chapter, which is more about the plan area and the basin setting. And this is what we will discuss today, and will be presented again in October. And the third chapter is about probably one of the key piece of the GSP, which is the sustainable management criteria. And we are shooting for having a discussion with the board in January about this, because sustainable management criteria is something that the GSA as a community needs to decide, approve, and really be fully on board with. And then the fourth chapter is about projects and management actions as needed, and for example, ideas of future scenarios and possible projects that can help or are needed in the second phase, basically, of the GSP. And then the implementation. So this is the structure of the full GSP development. What we are working on right now, it's really this chapter number 2, that is about the area, the basin settings, and it includes the hydrogeological conceptual model, the groundwater condition, both current condition and historical condition. That's why we were kind of bugging the TAC and asking around for information about how things have changed in the basin in the past 20 years or so. And then the water budget, which has to be represented in terms of historical condition for the water budget, and also projected based on whatever land use change we may think, based on climate. And DWR developed some climate scenarios that would like us to use in our projected budget. And whatever we think should be simulated in terms of possible change in the system that would affect the water budget. So this is really what we are working on. And if we look at the DWR develop a GSP annotated outline, and so the way we will be writing the GSP is really following step by step the annotated outline. And we already started, so the chapters are already in place with an outline, and we are filling in pieces step by step. We would like to avoid giving you the entire, 1,500 pages of the GSP all at once. So that shouldn't happen. It will not happen. So I think it's important to really get comments while we go, and so we will try to be on time on giving you a chapter at a time. And as I said, the introduction is more like about the purpose of this GSP and the sustainability goal, just as an introduction that the GSA is looking at. And then the agency information. So these are more kind of administrative and technical information. So this is not one of our complicated chapters, let's say. But then we get to chapter number 2, and the first part is on the hydrogeologic conceptual model. And this is what we are revisiting based on the comments that we got in April from the TAC. And these are the requirements. These are the things that need to be in the chapter. They need to be addressed in some way. And obviously, each GSP will be slightly different because each basin has different problems, different characteristics. But we need to include a graphical and narrative description of the physical components of the basins, at least 2 scale cross sections, which is what we are really reworking on. And then some maps of the physical characteristics that go from topography, superficial geology, soil characteristics. We need to evaluate recharge and discharge areas, the surface water bodies, and because it's so important here, we are really spending quite a bit of our time with a good representation of surface water. And then source and point of delivery for local and imported water supplies. And when we keep going into this chapter, we are also working on the current and historical groundwater conditions. And I will show you later, we started really with some analysis of the data that are available online as they are right now. So they are not data that we processed in any way, but it's good to give you an idea of what is available. And then the third paragraph is really about the water budget information. And most likely we will have a preliminary water budget that will be a sort of very simple, let's call it back of the envelope calculation, but then the water budget will come out of the model. So the one we will be really discussing about is the one that our model will say, okay, this is how much water is getting into the system, this is how much water is going out, these are all the processes that we are representing. And I have a sketch later of all the pieces of the water budget that we will be considering. So this is mainly to give you an idea of what you will get in a way or in another. Obviously, This one is general for all the basins, so for sure we will not be discussing about seawater intrusions, but this is what it's in the regulations. And just to give you an idea, for groundwater conditions, what it's needed, it's really representation of historical groundwater levels. We will have some problems with that because you know that in the past there was not much of a data collection, so we don't have many points all over the valley, and we will show you that there is something we can do, but that's exactly why we think it's important to monitor a little bit more. And so we will present maps of groundwater elevation, and we have hydrographs with the groundwater elevation changing over time, and I will show you how it looks like right now. So if you go on the website of DWR and just plot those data. And then we also need to represent an estimate of eventually change in groundwater storage. So if we see something that has changed over time. So if we go into the hydrogeological sectoral model, this is the system we are working with. So the entire the red area is the entire Russian River watershed, and it's the model, the entire area that the USGS is considering for their effort together with the State Water Board and Sonoma Water. We are up here, so the purple shaded area is the area of the new model that we are developing that consider the entire watershed, so consider the contribution of flow coming from the hillside during winter time and not only. And then the black area is the Ukiah Valley groundwater basin. So right now, what you have seen up to now is just a model of this part. And what's happening right now is that all this area, it's a model. And the way this model is developed is, we already talked about that, is completely in agreement with what USGS is doing. So hopefully, once both efforts are finished, USGS will be able to completely import the Ukiah Valley model. And obviously you would argue, what's the benefit of that? The benefit might be that the models will not come out with completely different results. So we will have a good foundation to discuss about future scenarios, and we will not have fluxes going in opposite direction like what's happening in Central Valley or whatever. So this is the goal. And so regarding the groundwater conditions now, basically what we have to demonstrate and just really literally go through all these steps in the development of the GSP is that we don't see any impact on groundwater elevation. We don't see impact in groundwater storage. We don't have seawater intrusion, obviously you don't have it. We don't see degraded groundwater quality. There's no land subsidence and interconnected surface impact on interconnected surface water. What we did is thinking already based on what we know right now, what can we in a sense just cross without, we will have to do our due diligence and present everything in the GSP, but there are chapters that don't require really much of an effort. And so we divided all the 6 undesirable results in 3 categories, like what we think it's not a problem, what we think we can easily characterize as and show that it's acceptable, and what we need to start doing something in terms of management, maybe, but we don't know yet. So because anyway, we are at the beginning of the process. We are not fully done. Obviously, we don't need, we will just put a sentence about seawater intrusion because we don't have it. Most likely we can easily, and I will show you the plots later, we can usually characterize as acceptable the groundwater elevation, storage, quality, and lot subsidence. We will still have to do our data collection. Like for groundwater quality, we still need to demonstrate, so gather all the existing data from the website and demonstrate that the only potential problem is really like boron, but that's geology. That's not due to whatever applications or human impact. So it's doesn't matter what, that the boron is there because of the rocks. And land subsidence, for example, we can look at reports on roads if there was a failure or something. Most likely there will be nothing, but that's the only thing you can do to really demonstrate that it's not a problem. And I will show you later the plots of groundwater elevation, and you will see why we believe we can find a way to show that are acceptable. So at the end, the only one that eventually we know already that we will have to characterize and eventually think about what management we can do if needed. Again, think about that we are at the beginning and maybe we will already find a solution, is the impact on interconnected surface waters. And that's exactly keeping in mind that this is our final goal. That's why we are revamping the model, changing everything. We want to have a tool that will help us answering this question or demonstrating that there is no problem, or eventually giving us an idea of what can we do in case we see that there is something that can be done. And to give you an idea about groundwater condition, we downloaded from the CASGEM website all the data that have for groundwater levels that have been collected in the valley, and we combine them in north, central, and southern location, and this is pretty much what comes out. So this is groundwater condition in all the wells that were in the circle up here in the north, and from 2014. So again, you can see that we don't have a long history most of the time. So that's one of the problem. And for each measurement, we have eventually 2 measurements per year. For each location, we have eventually 2 measurements per year. So we don't have really a long, but doesn't look like we can, even during the drought, we cannot really see any significant impact on groundwater levels. And then if we move into the central area, this is how the plot look like. So again, there is no clear pattern that we can see. And as I said, we didn't do anything with this data, just plotted what is available online. And this is in the south. So it's interesting that there was not a single well showing some kind of consistent decline. There is this argument that it's a short time period, so we will have to address that in some way. And we know that there are other data that are from the city that we can plot in terms of for showing a longer time series, so we will do that as well. But these are the CASGEM wells that are available. And then we also started some analysis of stream flows. And so we looked at all the stream flow data available from 1991, and we were just looking at average precipitation, and you can see how things, the impact of the drought on the stream flows and on the precipitation as expected. So the red, it's the Russian River north of Ukiah. The green is the East Fork release, and the black is the Russian River north of Oakland, so the free location where we have continuous measurements. So you can have an idea of how things have changed over time. And then the blue up here is the precipitation. So that's it's interesting because at the end of the day, what we were noticing is that there is a general, looks like a decrease in the amount of precipitation that the valley is getting, but at the end of the day, the real dry year was 2013 year, and then 2014 had already water.
Well, at 13, it shows a little bit. I don't even remember the little bit that happened, so it seemed like it was totally dry.
2014?
13.
13, yeah, exactly. In fact, 13 is really almost nothing. But it's interesting that 2014, which has been dry for many other areas, here it's kind of looks like more an average year. It doesn't look like, so 14 seems to be already kind of picking up a little bit. So, but definitely 13 was unbelievable. It was a very, very small number. And we are doing some more analysis of existing data on stream flows, looking more at seasonality. Here is really just yearly data, but we are looking at monthly and more than monthly to really understand how the flow changes over time in each single year. And this is to give you an idea of mainly the last 10 years, so from 2008 until 2019, how things have changed. So you see basically because of the little precipitation in 2013, you see the impact on 2014 in terms of stream flow. And it's we just need to be able, what we want to do is really kind of correlate all the information that we are getting and start to get a picture even just with the existing data, so that that the model will be able to kind of represent this pattern in terms of stream flows. And then we will refine, most likely once we start getting continuous data, we will be refining our ideas for sure, because something will be wrong, but at least we would like to be able to represent this trend. And so if we go into the water budget, just to give you an idea why all the components we talked about are important and how it's a graphical representation of the water budget that will be discussed in the GSP chapter. So our model will be a fully integrated model. There will be the watershed model that really represent whatever's come as precipitation, which is running over the surface and getting into the groundwater basin, or just creating flows in the tributaries. So we have a surface water system, and then we have a soil bucket where basically we will be measuring whatever goes into the shallow soil, and this is where we will be accounting for land use, crop type, irrigation type, all the possible impact on the system. And then we have a deeper aquifer simulation. And if we think in terms of some of the interaction between these three buckets, these three buckets will enter, they will all enter into the model. They are just represented in different ways. And so we have surface flow going into the system, and we know that. And we have surface water that is going out of the system in upland, basically. And we also have some surface water which is diverted for irrigation. And that's counted in a different way. It's not groundwater pumping, obviously. And then when we go into the soil bucket, we will be accounting for the amount of precipitation and the amount of evapotranspiration that is happening. So these are the two main fluxes into the soil water budget, together with the irrigation that is diverted.
Excuse me?
Sure.
I didn't understand what you said about how you're going to monitor the diverted irrigation.
We are modeling it. We are not monitoring it.
So there's no plans to figure out how to monitor that?
Basically, the idea is what we asked the TAC to review is a map that tells us which fields are mostly irrigated through surface water, what is irrigated through groundwater, and there are databases for that. So we will start from that and see how that comes all together. At the last TAC meetings, the main suggestion we got is, okay, get started with your model, come back here with numbers, and we'll start discussing how to make them, more close to reality of what really is happening into the valley. So once we will have, basically what we will be doing is, for next time, we should have a number associated to each of these arrows. So you will have a sort of a complete budget, complete idea of where is the water coming in from, where is it going, and then if something looks like, oh no, we really believe it's wrong, that's the time when we have to start discussing and refining the numbers.
I would imagine diverted water is a pretty substantial impact up here.
But and we went also through all the diversion that are reported at the State Water Board. So those are already included into there is a big database, and those are already included in the model. We did a due diligence of really creating a file that represent all those diversions. And then if there is something that is not represented, we will have to find out from somebody. Because
I can think of a couple.
when they will come, when the exact number will come back, it's the moment we need to hear this is something we can agree and we can live with, or it's something that we don't like and you have to change.
Laura, one scenario would be that we could certainly spot check with a couple of properties or things like that, and just
Yeah.
make sure that your grid cells agree with what's really going on at that site.
Yeah.
Just to improve people's confidence in the result.
Yeah. And that's exactly what Levi suggested last time.
Yeah.
To just double check and get started, but he wanted to see some numbers up front. And once the numbers are there, and not only Levi, but somebody else in the tax, it's gonna be easier for us to discuss and tell you, oh, you have to adjust this, you have to adjust that. That's kind of the goal. But it's gonna be important that once we come up with a full budget that really represent all the pieces into the system, we get these type of comments on that you really dig into these maps. They will not be so complicated, but everybody need to agree. If we agree on the water budget, everything will be much, much easier later on. So if there is disagreement on that, and then it's gonna be difficult to also discuss about criteria and discuss about scenarios. And is that good for you? And and then the last two pieces are, we know that there is out of the soil bucket, let's call it like that, some of the water is used by the plants, obviously, but some is evapotranspirating, but some of the water is just recharging the aquifer. So we will be estimating how much water is really recharging the aquifer, and then there will be water leaving the aquifer because of irrigation and pumping. So again, it looks like talking about water budget, looks like it's complicated, but basically really what we will be doing, and we will be doing this for different type of land use, for example, but we will try to put numbers next to each of these arrows. And I also forgot that this is what it's important here. Obviously, we have a connection between the surface water and the groundwater. So as we were saying earlier, we will have reaches, parts of the river that are losing water, that it's entering into the groundwater, but there will be parts of the river that will be recharged by the groundwater. And that's our job will be to see if we can represent this type of condition and these processes in a correct way. And how to do that, I think we still look forward to your data on the reaches that get dry will be, those will be kind of a key information. So, good. But because there is nothing better than being able to say in this period of the year, this reach needs to be dry. There is no water. And that's a kind of a very certain type of measurements. And so we should, because of the lack of data, we should use whatever we can come to our mind in terms of making the model more reliable. And so hopefully we will have all the numbers for you as a preliminary. I mean, we don't expect that by October to have something that everybody will be happy with, but at least there will be something. In terms of data availability, just to tell you what we did up to now, we looked at all the data available online. So these are just the data that I presented today and that we presented to the TAC last time. A main comments that we got last time is that some of the information needs to be updated because they are not really current. So we are trying to do that. In terms of well data, which means CastGen data, the DWR data library, I think we have all what's available online, and it's pretty much a complete set of information. In terms of the stream, for the surface water data, again, all what is available online, we gather that, and we are still working on some river cross sections. And now what we are just creating is this big bucket, let's say, that will collect all our information. So all the information that we talked about now, they are entering into the integrated hydrological model, which is done with a tool which is called GSFlow, and no need to go into the details of that. The reason why we picked this one, just to refresh your mind, is because that's the tool that Sonoma Water and USGS are using. So we use the same type of approach. And this tool includes a package, a model that does the rainfall runoff, so it takes into account the watershed, plus a tool that includes the groundwater model, which is called Mudflow. And this is the map. So basically, we are really simulating the entire purple area up there, and this is our, I think, final representation of the stream systems after a lot of reviews, and probably there will be some more reviews coming on. The entire basin has been divided in cells that are 100 meter by 100 meters, and the reason for picking this number is because the USGS tool is developed with a 300 meter resolution, so we wanted something that could fit perfectly into their cell, but was more refined, because we want to be able to include more information. And so this is how our model looks like right now. We will be able to represent the inflows that all these tributaries may have into the valley. So we will have some flow coming into the basin. And again, this seems to be kind of the latest version. We may go through some more refinement later, but we presented different options at the TAC meeting and asked for suggestion on, if you just use GIS and online data and tools, and you represent the stream network in Ukiah Valley, you cannot imagine. Looks like there is water everywhere. And obviously we know that that's not the reality. So we kind of went through some kind of understanding which are the reaches that actually are really there and they are important, which are the reaches we can kind of skip. And we will be sharing this type of information with USGS so that we are sure that we represent the same things.
Is this the auditing that you were talking about? So each of these represents some square, and so the water use of that square is accurately represented on that map based on what our assumptions are in the model?
Theoretically, you could say these 9 grid cells represent Haiku Vineyard. And then you could go over to Haiku Vineyard and say, what are the real numbers?
Got it, okay.
And then just make sure they're in the ballpark.
Yeah.
And more, I guess even more so, just you're not assuming residential use where a vineyard exists or vice versa as well? Or is that, I was thinking it was that level, you're actually going to a much more sophisticated level. It's as sophisticated as you just described.
Yeah, there's literally 9 cells or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's Haiku,
Yeah.
and that's being modeled as ag water use.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
So in principle, we should be able to come up with a budget for each parcel or each area, and actually our model will have a budget for each 100 meter by 100 meter cell. So it's even more refined. The reason why we did it so refined is exactly, it may look even too much, but again, our problem is how to represent the streams and the connection with the streams. And if we go too big, then the stream is a little piece within a big area, and it's more complicated to really constrain it. I think as a preliminary results for October, we'll be able also to divide the water budgets by land use, for example, to get a preliminary idea if we are, again, in the ballpark numbers. And then as needed, as requested by local that have some ideas of their specific area condition, we can always extract local condition, local data from the model. So the model will have a water budget every 100 meters. Okay, and the model will be simulating the entire area from 1991 to 2018. We know that for the 1990s, we don't have that many data available, but that's okay in the sense that we will use that period more for like a spin-up time, so the model will get ready for when, starting in 1999, we have more information available. And we develop a land use map, and the land use maps are based on the land use from DWR in 2010, a crop map in 2014, and then we pretty much revised everything by talking to Glenn, the chair of the TAC, talking to other stakeholders, and we are developing right now what we would call like a current land use map. But I think we have a good grasp now of how the land use has changed between 1991 and now. Obviously, the data are better after 2000, but we can include these changes into the model, because obviously the change in land use is affecting how much water is used and how much water is recharging. And then I showed you, we did a map of the water bodies and the stream network. Beside working on the stream, we also worked on mapping all the frost irrigation ponds, because those are important in your system and they will be simulated into the model. And these are data, for example, that USGS really didn't consider much, so we will be providing them with some of our information, because again, if we want them to simulate the system up here properly, we need, looks like we need to contribute with part of what we're doing. And basically what it's really connecting the two systems, so the watershed model and the groundwater model, it's whatever is represented in the rivers. So how the rivers are flowing through the system from upper in the watershed down into the valley, and when they get into the Russian River. And I think this is pretty much it. I included some more references and data that we don't need to go through today, but it's mainly for your information. And if you have questions, you're always welcome to ask or reach out to us for suggestion and everything. Thank you.
Okay, on the attachments, the map, HCM, it shows CLSI, is that California Land Stewardship
Yep.
Institute gauges? Okay. Right. Any more questions or statements? We have public comment on this?
Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau, and one of these maps, and I didn't print it out, I apologize, still listed the gauges that are present that are operated by National Marine Fisheries Service, I believe. And I was wondering, did anybody ever truth that York Creek gauge that was still represented on that map? Because I went back through my records, and the gauge that I had access to back starting in 2010 isn't reading, the last readings that were pulled from that gauge are from 2015. So I wasn't sure if that gauge was even still there, or what the status of that gauge was on York Creek. I believe that California Land Stewardship Institute had worked with them on potentially the West Fork gauge, but that York Creek gauge was quite questionable. And as I brought up last time, when those gauges were installed as part of the frost protection regulation program, accuracy wasn't exactly the top goal, I would say, in terms of how those were installed and how those were monitored. I did bring a picture that I could submit of one of the gauges that didn't last a season and was pretty much annihilated, but that one was down on McNabb Creek. I didn't have pictures of York Creek. I know at the time there were issues with that gauge placement and interaction with the main stem of the Russian River because of the proximity of where they put it. So I would question the quality of that data if it is being used in this process.
Yeah, so because of your comment last time, we did our research, and we had discussion about which data will be really used and which data will not be used. Still in the maps, we were presenting all what's available, and then obviously the document will say, okay, these data are reliable, these data are not reliable. So we had a long meeting last month with Mike Webster, and then we talked to Laurel from CLSI, and just to understand how, because they are taking over some of the gauges, and basically they gave us all the information about which data should be used because they are reliable, and which data we still have to mention them, but basically they are in the maps. But what we will take care of is that in the documents we will say all the possible problems with all these gauges. So they are still represented because in any case it's data that at some point were collected. So right now we are still keeping it there. And then if the feeling is that no, the data are absolutely useless, let's put it that way, we can decide of removing everything. But right now we are keeping them there with the idea of we develop a quick document with a kind of a summary of the quality of each stream gauge and how we can or we cannot use them.
Anyone else comment? Seeing none. So, any other direction? Seeing none, we're gonna move forward. So, is there anything else you wanna present on that one, huh? One more item?
There's one more item.
On the PowerPoint, yes.
No.
No? Oh, the final budget?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thought maybe there was some more PowerPoint.
Yeah,
but I
sorry.
didn't see it.
We duplicated it, so I give 2 copies.
Oh,
Share
okay.
with a friend.
I'm going, okay, I think this is all ready.
Yeah.
So Laura, thank you. All righty. Moving forward, we do have item E. This is discussion and possible adoption of the proposed fiscal year budget 1920. Ms. Duquette, do you want to go over this?
Sarah Duquette, Mendocino County, as a few years ago when we adopted our bylaws and our JPA, the treasurer and controller of the agency is the County of Mendocino. So we manage the money in the trust account, which the dues went into. We also operate this budget through the Mendocino County Water Agency. That way, everything from the trust account and the expenses can be run through the county's yearly audit, and we meet the audit requirements for the JPA. So you have 2 attachments before you. The first one is a munis report that shows the original deposits of the $5,000 each, and then the journal entries for costs associated with the administration of the agency. The other one is actual numbers from 17-18. So moving into this current fiscal year we're in, we had $15,691. We ran the numbers based on journal entry based on work done on a quarterly basis. So once the books close, or once the fiscal year closes in July, we'll do the final journal entry for administrative services for the month of April, May, and June. And so we project that there's going to be $9,741 left. We've put in money for the administrative costs. We've also put some placeholders for public noticing, legal services, so like contract reviews by counsel and things like that. Kind of miscellaneous dollars, so if we have costs maybe that are associated with meetings or outreach meetings or things that pop up, there's money there. It could be a lot like this year where we don't really expect to use that much, but by mid-year, so around probably February, we'll be able to come and report to you to let you know if we think we have enough funding to provide services for another year, or if we need to consider dues and what that dollar amount would be. But we definitely have enough to get us through this fiscal year and probably through part of next fiscal year as well. we haven't really used the legal services, but now that we're starting to get into the point where we're doing agreements and we have a GSP, we do have the ability to have legal review of things if need be. So I can answer any questions for you.
And so the heads up is, basically, we'll revisit this in February 2020 to see if each of the member agencies need to go back to their individual entities and look at bringing some money in for the membership.
Correct, and I think the idea from the very beginning was we were going to try to use dues as to get us through adoption of a GSP, and we have the final understanding of what it's really going to take to do implementation and run the agency. And we don't have that answer, and we figure that would be at least enough for 3 fiscal years, possibly more. And it looks like yes for 3 fiscal years, and probably part of the following. So, yeah, we'll bring back I'll bring back our actual numbers and suggestions of if we need to look at dues, how much would it be, and how many years do we want to try to cover.
Sure. Vice Chair Crane, did you have a question?
Well, a suggestion that we give consideration of the idea of making a contribution each year to stay in the habit of doing that. Maybe small, hopefully, but instead of going through everything and then saying, now what? Just a thought.
Any other comments? Good comment, appreciate it. And staff can take that into consideration, that probably is a good idea to start on a yearly basis, small contribution, so that it's always there and within a budget each year.
So that it stays on each agency's radar.
Mr. Catton.
We can bring that back as options, and we can bring it back pretty early. We can bring it back in maybe January. That way all the agencies have sufficient time for their own budget processes to incorporate the final decision.
And then thinking about other entities I sit on, we did not have to do a formal published notice for proposed budget.
No, upon my research, we have an interesting setup because this is included in the county's audit, and it's a trust account managed by the county, and all of the dollars that move through payment moves through the Mendocino County Water Agency, and that was incorporated in our budget. And looking at other GSAs and water agencies, it's not quite. It's really a budget base. There was no statute that I identified based on our structure that would require a notice public hearing.
Okay, thank you. This does require action, though, of the Board of Directors to adopt a budget for the coming year. Do I have a motion? It's moved by Director Brown. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And that's a second by Director Robinson. And I should go to public comment. Forgot to do that, sorry. Seeing no one come forward, it's back to the board. Clerk, roll call, please.
Director Robinson.
Aye.
Alternate Director Todd.
Aye.
Alternate Director Rodrigue.
Aye.
Director Brown. Vice Chair Crane.
Aye.
Chair Brown.
Aye,
Motion carries unanimously.
thank you. Okay, moving along. Director's reports. Do we have any? Seeing none, but before we go to adjournment, we are counting on a meeting in July now, every month for a while? Or do we have any anticipated? We are gonna have to move on, take some action for any submittals for grant funding or for any wells being drilled or a plan. What?
We'll definitely have a meeting this summer. I would say for sure in the month of August, possibly in July. But when we get closer to knowing where we are in terms of all of the agreements, I'll have a better idea if it's going to be July or August, or if we have to do a meeting in between to finalize all the documents. So, but there will be a meeting this summer.
Okay.
And then definitely in the month of October when we have all the preliminary data.
And what about the TAC?
The TAC will be meeting in the month of October.
Okay. Ready. Right. With no other business, what time is it? We did good. We're adjourned.